seeing their lives get better because of the changes that you implemented, because of the research you brought forward, that is just powerful stuff. It's a really strong motivator.
Nisreen, how has your point of view of the discipline of user experience changed through the years, if at all?
When I was at Ford, I was part of a relatively small, very agile, very flexible product team. A lot of the work I did was driven by me in collaboration with my partners. I was the one who was identifying research opportunities and bringing them forward. As I started working in larger and larger organizations and moving into leadership, it's very difficult to operate in that way at scale. And so I think I've learned a lot about how to balance flexibility and scale. You have to have some level of consistency and standardization in how you approach research and how you do things, but you still need to be flexible enough to adapt to changing priorities. And that's something else I've learned a lot is I think it's something that a lot of companies struggle with is how to prioritize effectively and how to maintain those priorities. Because as a business, your needs are going to be continuously changing. And as a research team, you need to constantly adapt to that while also preserving some consistency in our process and how we do things so that we have a sustainable approach to work. So I think that balance is something I've been thinking about a lot. And it's something that is becoming more and more apparent as more and more UX teams are growing and maturing in industries where maybe they historically have not. In the time since I've left Ford, and their design team has grown quite a bit, right? And become much more fundamental business partners versus just being one designer and a little product team and this little department. And so that's something we all have to think about is how do we scale? And how do we do so with enough flexibility to continue doing our job well?
Yes. So where has that gone through the years? Have you scaled more? Have you been more flexible, less flexible? How has that changed?
It depends on the culture of the organization. So at Rocket, we've definitely leaned more heavily, I think, on flexibility versus consistency or standardization. Business priorities were changing so regularly, it was just a necessity. But there's certain things that we preserved. Right now at PayPal, we have a little bit more structure because the research team has been around for a lot longer than it was when I was at Rocket. I had started that. So it was only 2-3 years old by the time I even left Rocket. It's dependent on the culture of the organization. And that's kind of the fun part of leadership is being able to suss that out and understand the culture of your organization and how people interact with each other, what their priorities are and how decisions get made and how work gets done. And then being able to both integrate into that so that you can be a part of that process and part of that greater organization, but also finding the places where you need to push back and change things and we have to do things differently. This isn't a point of view that's necessarily changed over the years, but something that I'm just thinking about more and more because it's becoming more relevant as I get more exposed to larger organizations.
Yeah. So I know that you have been an IC, an individual contributor, and you're now a leader. What would you say if you have a perspective of the pros and cons of each of those types of roles?
I think the advantage of being an IC is you have an opportunity to go so deep in the work. The changes that are made based on the research are truly coming from you, and that can be really meaningful, right? Especially when you see a large customer impact, especially if you're continuously doing research in a particular space or a particular product, or if you have a customer panel that you're touching again and again, seeing their lives get better because of the changes that you implemented, because of the research you brought forward, that is just powerful stuff. It's a really strong motivator. When it comes to leadership, the impact you have looks different. It's more of an organizational impact, a culture impact. It's more about crafting an environment where your team can be successful versus being responsible for the success yourself, so to speak. And so you're just working at a level of breadth where you're not as closely tied to the specific insights that are being delivered, but you're helping to facilitate that and make it happen in an org that may not be perfectly suited for it yet and working to change things. You can have a very meaningful impact as a leader, but you don't always see it at the end of a particular research project. There's no easy beginning and end to it. I knew pretty early on that I wanted to move into leadership because I'm really fascinated by the way that organizations work. And I'm really passionate about supporting other people. Even as an IC, I created the first community of practice around design and research at Ford and really built that out and built a playbook and stuff like that. So I really believe in investing in others, mentoring others, growing others, developing others. And you're just positioned to do, and you can definitely do that as an IC for sure. But you're positioned to do that in different ways as a leader. I've been responsible for creating new career ladders that support folks in advancing their careers, whether they want to be an IC. I've supported folks in developing career growth plans and really helped them grow. I've had folks go from intern to senior during my tenure at a company. That's also impactful and meaningful to see somebody truly grow to that extent in a short amount of time because you've invested in them and they've responded to that. So it's also just being able to create structures that help everybody reach their full potential. That's really what's driven me from very early on in my career.
Yeah. And that's a challenge because people have things going on in their lives and
yes,
they're made by different things. So helping them reach their goals must be very challenging when multiple people, multiple things.
Yeah. And coming back to our conversation on research maturity too, I believe in order to mature a research team, you have to have a really clear purpose and vision in place that everyone's working towards. And there are going to be times where that purpose and vision resonates with some people and not everyone. So working with folks to find purpose within that vision and supporting it in a way that plays to their skills and their interests is something that's also really interesting and I think can be done in most cases. But you have to invest the time in understanding what your team wants, what they're looking for, who they want to be, how they want to contribute, creating a space for them to play within that.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing that.
Check out all my interviews with industry leaders on BlatzChatz.